Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I am your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got Mizzou Athletic Director Laird Veatch. How you doing?
Great, Brett. How are you?
How's it feel to be in Illinois territory right now?
It feels good. We come over here just for a little bit, and then we'll go back and take care of business here.
That's right.
Here a little bit longer.
So for those watching or listening, we get the bragging rights game tonight, Mizzou versus Illinois, and so I thought, man, it's pretty cool. This morning I was getting ready. I'm like, we're coming to the Illinois side and going to go back tonight, have a little dinner at the Missouri Athletic Club, and then go to the game, and hopefully Mizzou wins.
Yeah, that's the plan.
I think I've had this conversation with you before. I grew up an Illinois kid. So I grew up in Illinois. I grew up 30 minutes from the Illini Assembly Hall. And then my son goes to Mizzou, and all of a sudden I changed from navy and orange to black and gold or black and yellow, and it feels good. I like it.
Yeah, it's where you were always meant to end up,
That's
right? That was the plan.
And now kid number 2 looking like he may go there as well, so we'll be there for a little bit longer, which is exciting. So, like I do every podcast, Laird, is always like to start with what helped make you the man you are today.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, it's a great question. There's a lot to it. I would first of all say I think probably most folks end up drawing back to their parents and upbringing, and I'd certainly belong in that category. I have 2 parents that in many ways kind of self-made, grew up on farms, both dirt poor, and then ended up moving to Manhattan, Kansas when I was real young, and sports have always been a big part of my life, and really in many ways what developed me as a man and as a leader, and so from early days I've always been involved with sports, and then right out of high school went to Kansas State and played for a man named Bill Snyder, and so you can imagine the work ethic and discipline that was expected in that program, just from probably the little things you've heard, and certainly that was very impactful on me from a development standpoint, and throughout my career. I've had an opportunity on the professional side to work for and with a lot of incredible people, some great mentors, Joe Castiglione, Mike Alden. I've had athletic directors and other people I've worked with that have just been great people to be around, that have helped form and impact me. And I have a great wife who's awesome with our children, and been an incredible partner to me throughout our marriage of 27 years now.
That's awesome. 4 kiddos.
4 kids, yeah.
I think we got something in common there. I've got 4 kids. I've got a son named Drew. I think you got a son named Drew. So, like you just said, you played football at K-State. You were the team captain your senior year. You've also been the athletic director at Memphis from 2019 to 2024. You were at Florida, K-State, Iowa State, Mizzou another time, and Texas for a grad assistant. So you've seen a lot of high-level football, high-level basketball, high-level sports. When people hear AD of Mizzou, what do you think? They think budgets, they think NIL, they think transfer portal, they think coaches. What do you think shapes you the most to lead all of that stuff?
Another great question. I think the job of athletic director has changed dramatically over the years, particularly in the last handful of years with the onset of the transfer portal and NIL and all the changing landscape we're dealing with. And it's become, more and more demanding in terms of managing the business aspect of an athletic department. But I also like to think that the background as a student athlete myself and just growing up in the profession gives me a perspective of not only knowing what we need to do now, but what this is really all about to start with, and really not losing sight of that. Like, we have young people that we are impacting and providing opportunities that are pretty special and unique in this country, to have a chance to be a part of a team and to compete at literally the highest level for those age groups. It's a pretty remarkable opportunity. So being the steward of that and having that kind of core base value and perspective, I think is really helpful. But I've also always been on the business side, on revenue generation, fundraising, sponsorship sales, and that has become obviously front and center in the world we're in now. So that's been really helpful to be able to help navigate this and to be able to take an athletic department from what it has traditionally been to what it needs to be next, and where we're at now. I think that perspective has been really helpful.
Yeah, and I think too, you got some teammates over here with us as well, and I met with Riley today, and it was cool because he shared that you did the exact same job he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right? So
literally.
you literally did the same job, and now here you are these years later. What's something that you learned early on about leadership that is still with you to this day that maybe you learned when you were in Riley's seat?
Yeah. So, well, the couple things that come to mind immediately. First of all, I started off in the Tiger Scholarship Fund office. Literally, they were right out of grad school. So my first professional position. I was here essentially 8-9 years. My first 5 years or so was in the Tiger Scholarship Fund office, now the Mizzou Athletics Fund. And in that role, you, of course, learn a lot about relationship building. That is what the core of that job is about, is building trust and respect, and learning how to, serve people, take care of them, and also have the, trust and I would say comfortability with them to ask them for money, right? To ask them to support and invest. So that skill set, I think, was really important. But I also had, during that time frame, two pretty incredible mentors, Joe Castiglione and then Mike Alden, for the majority of the time, that helped me learn what leadership was about, and particularly in this role that I'm in now, and just seeing that firsthand, and all that goes into that in terms of just leading people, providing a vision, establishing a culture, and maintaining the discipline that is necessary to really be successful. I mean, those gentlemen were really impactful to me, and we just had an incredible group of people go through Mizzou at that time. That looking back on it now, you realize pretty fortunate to be around. So.
Well, I think it's about who you surround yourself with, right? My dad always said that when I was a younger guy, and it kind of made me mad. I'm like, what, you don't like my friends or whatever? But no, I thought it was cool too, is that I found out from Riley that it was you and one other person, and now you lead athletics at Mizzou. He leads athletics at Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I mean, talk about that. I mean, just having that surrounding. Yeah,
and it's so that's Ross Bjork, who's the AD. We actually came in literally a month apart, both straight out of grad school. We shared an office with a man named John Cadillac at the time. So the three of us had a big room in the back of the Hearn Center, talking on the phone all the time. That was interesting. But it is pretty incredible. You look back on those kind of experiences, and you realize that the experience we had at that time was preparing us for this, and we kind of knew it, kind of appreciated it, but probably not really to the extent that it has. And it's not just two of us. There's several of us that have gone through there, and that now have been or sitting athletic directors, or even if not ADs, they've been really successful in their careers in various ways. So it is pretty neat to look back and appreciate Mizzou, not only for the impact it has on student athletes, but on young professionals, right? I mean, that's a whole ecosystem of developing people, and that's pretty rewarding to see.
Yeah. So your role, the way I look at it, is you lead leaders, which can be really tough. I mean, you look at, just take basketball and football, and those coaches, and you're leading them, they're leading their men. Mm-hmm. What's that like for you, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, it is a really interesting dynamic when you are managing really high profile, highly successful leaders. That in many ways are more high profile than you are, and make more money than you do, and, all those things. Right. And so I have found over the years, if you take the perspective that you are there truly to serve them and to help them, empower them to be successful. Now, part of that empowerment is accountability, right? Mm-hmm. I do need to hold them accountable to within a budget or within the rules or whatever it is. But if you take the perspective that it's not about you, it's about them being successful so that they can lead their organizations, their units, that it really helps, and it puts things in the right perspective, and that is true. I mean, my job is to help experts in their field have the resources, the support to go get it done. So I tend to be I would say necessarily hands off, but very deferential to those leaders, as long as they continue to win and build trust with me and others and do things the right way. Then I just need to get out of their way and let them do their thing, but support them, right? That's a lot of my focus now is how do I help provide them the resources they need to be successful? And if I'm doing that every day, then my attention, my focus is on the right things that are really going to matter for them, and it allows them to go lead and do their thing.
Reminds me of Steve Jobs when he was building Apple. He talked about show a vision and get the heck out of the way, right? And that's exactly what you just said. Show the vision. So how do you work on that? On where the vision goes, like what's your philosophy? We go off-site and do retreats with our leadership team. Do you do stuff like that, or what's kind of your deal there? Yeah,
so we went through a process. I'd say really over the last probably 9 months or so. So I've been a year and a half, a little over a year and a half. When I first arrived at Mizzou, I started to kind of go down this path that is kind of the typical sort of AD 101 thing. When you arrive, you have your 90-day plan, and one of the things you do is sort of roll out a vision, and here's where we're headed together. And I decided at that time, and I think part of it is I'd been through being an AD once, starting and establishing that, And between that and between all the change that we were navigating at the time when I first arrived, with the house settlement coming up and all the stuff, all the changes we were going through, it just didn't feel right for me to say, okay, this is where we're headed together. I felt like I had to take some time to really, even though I'd been at Mizzou before, what's Mizzou about now, and where is this landscape headed in terms of college athletics, and how do we really articulate and position ourselves for a vision that is going to take where we're at now and navigate this new landscape and take advantage of the opportunity. So we've gone through a process here then over the last 9 months or so where I worked with an internal team, got input particularly from some of those leaders, and really thought through our vision, what we think the opportunity is, what are our values, what do we want to live by, and we've articulated all that. We've actually shared that all with our staff internally, and here at some point over the coming months we'll do something where we share that more broadly. But I felt like it was really important that we share that with our team first internally, with coaches, staff, etc. Really start to let that kind of take shape with them, and then at some point we'll be articulating that out more broadly. But I do think it's important, and it's important to know who you are, know where you're at, know where you're going, and be able to share that. Now, ultimately, that's about culture, right? It's about things that are really less strategic and more about who we are, what we want to live by, what we think the opportunity is, what we mean to the university, to our city, to our state. And I'm excited about what that means, where that's headed, and particularly with where we're at Mizzou right now. But it is really important, and it's something we've put some real thought into.
Talk about the days, as leaders, you don't just wake up every day and want to just go, right? So on those days that maybe you're having a bad day, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, whatever, or the pillow, how do you get refocused and energized to do the things that you need to do day in and day out?
I would say I'm not always the best at it, first of all. Okay. Yeah. I'm just like most of us. Sometimes you just tend to go, and then I don't do a very good job of refilling the tank as much as I should. It's something my wife tends to bring me back to reality every now and then and remind me of. But I have found one of the things I think. Two things come to mind. One of the things that I think differentiates people that are successful is when they're having those days and those moments, is how do you find a way to utilize that time, even though maybe your mind isn't at 100% or your energy level isn't at 100%, or you're not out having a day like I have today where I'm going meeting, and it's, you don't have a choice. You just got to show up and go make it happen. When you have those other days, how are you using that to step back and think and get better, right? To really, think about the things that need to be thought about. Because so many times in our world, we're going so fast and we're doing so many things that you literally have to have time to think and to step back, to analyze what you're doing, to think about those big kind of driving needs and challenges, and how are we working through that. Yeah. So I try to do that with those days. And then, the other things that's awesome in my profession is we have, such easy ways to kind of step back and get refocused, because we're around student athletes and competition and practices and young people. And so when I have those days or those moments where I'm kind of, I can feel myself sort of drifting, just the chance to go stop by a practice and see student athletes, see coaches, see them in their environment, be around that. Because candidly, I don't get to do it as much as I would like, or even near as much as I used to 4 or 5 years ago, because the world is so different now. My job is to be out. It's to be, shaking hands and securing resources, and that's where I can help them the most, right? But what you enjoy, what you want to do is be around them, right? Because that's what gets you into this thing. It's like that, the energy that comes from young people and competition. So, having a chance to maybe step out and go do that is a good way to reinvigorate. How
do you handle the comments or the comments on social media? I mean, the social media is nonsense. It's crazy, right? Because my decisions I make every day running a wealth management firm, they're not going to Twitter and they're not going to Instagram and making comments, right? Do you eliminate all that stuff? Like, how do you embrace that?
I would say for the most part, I do eliminate. One of the things that I made a conscious decision when I first became an AD, that, first of all, I'm not a natural social media guy. So that's not like where I'm inclined to go. But that when I became an AD, I make a decision, okay, am I going to really engage in social media and really make that part of my strategy and approach, or am I going to step back? Now, I follow a few people, I watch a little bit here and there, but I have intentionally not made that my thing, because I do think one of my mentors told me, he said, when you get into this role, you got to control your inputs. Because there'll be plenty of options for you to listen to, and if you're not listening to the right ones, it'll skew your perspective. And social media, that's basically the definition of what it is, right? So
garbage in, garbage out.
So I have very little. I expose myself to that very little, but I also have staff that are around us that do monitor that, and they'll help bring things to me if hey, there's something you need to be aware of. But that in itself is very helpful, because of that, I hear people say to me, "Hey, did you see this?" Or no, I just didn't see it, because it's not really going to be helpful. I need to be listening to, the people that are really, in the bunker, so to speak, and that are really engaged, whether that is our coaches or our staff or our student athletes or our, donors and sponsor partners that are really engaged and really with us, who is the leaders of our university, those are the people that I need to be listening to and connecting with. So that filter has really helped me. But I also, you have to stay engaged, right? You can't just completely disconnect from it. You have to be aware, but also not let it overly influence your perspective.
What these cameras are all around here. If we followed you around, for a week, what are the things that we would see that day in and day out Laird Veatch is doing? Like, what are no miss items for you?
My kids always ask me, like, so what, Dad, what do you do? What are you doing every day? And I said, well, I was in a bunch of meetings. I answered a bunch of emails. I made a bunch of calls. It's just kind of literally not.
Do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, it's not that different than what you see. Your job in many ways. You're meeting with people. Yeah. You are meeting with customers. You're meeting with staff. You're having conversations. You're reading information. You're making decisions. You're providing guidance. That kind of stuff. But in my world now. Much of it is either meeting with our staff to kind of keep things moving, right? To make decisions, help guide what's going on. A lot of it is financially based. A lot of it is just personnel based. Those are the kind of things that you're focused on, meeting about, talking about. The other big piece of it is being out and asking for support, but also building relationships with sponsors and others that are meaningful, right? Because there is a misconception in our world that we're always just out with our hand out, right, to ask people to support and give, and that is key, right? Sure. But it also has to be done in a way that is meaningful to them, right? So if I'm meeting with a prospective donor or a current donor, we want them to really enjoy and appreciate their relationship by the experience they get out of it from games or a passion they have for a certain sport or whatever it is. It has to be meaningful. And the same is true with sponsorship side, with the business side now. Is we're not just out asking for handouts with NIL for our student athletes. We want to do it in a way that's meaningful to their business, that is something that can be sustained and really beneficial, mutually beneficial over time. So that takes effort and work, right? Those relationships, those conversations, that dialogue. It's not just to show up. It's I really got to get to know you, and I get to understand your business and how you're operating, what you're trying to accomplish. So that that, and me being in that role and doing it is just as important as Riley or Eric or others, the rest of our staff. We all got to be doing it, but that's a key way for me to lead. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. And then the other thing that comes to mind is I do spend a lot of time with our board of curators and our president and other leaders in our university, because the alignment with them in terms of how they help and support and impact athletics, and vice versa, how athletics impacts the institution, is critically important these days. So I spend a lot of time with them as well, just making sure we're on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish, what the next big decisions are, that kind of thing.
How do you, and you mentioned this earlier, maybe you don't do it as much, but do you protect your mindset and your energy? A lot of the guests we have on here, we talk about that, your mindset, your energy. For me, it's journaling, it's reading in the morning, it's doing some exercise. Do you have those morning rituals that when the quote unquote lights aren't on, right? You're not the AD. What are you doing at home?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a faithful guy, so my faith with the Lord is really important. All right, that's awesome. That relationship is critical. It's everything, right? It is the foundation that I draw from and live by. So, get up in the morning. I've always kind of put the faith relationship and exercise together in my life. I don't know why that is, but I typically get up in the morning early. I work out. I pray. I read my Bible. Have some time to sort of collect myself and think. But starting off the days like that is hugely important. And making the right kind of decisions. I found the night before where I'm in a position where I have the energy to get up and go do that. All goes together. So yeah, that's a huge part of my life.
It's good. Yeah. So this is a topic you probably don't get to talk much about, but the NIL and transfer portal. You talk much about that at all?
Yeah.
You guys talk much about that?
What is that? What does that stand for? Again?
I've never heard of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously it's completely changed the game. From your vantage point, what do people outside your guys' world? What are we seeing go wrong, or not wrong? But what's the outside industry getting wrong about it?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that could come to mind, but there is first of all, just confusion and not real understanding about what NIL is. I think part of that came from how NIL came about. So I think it's always important to remind folks that the onset of NIL and the transfer portal was not necessarily a conscious decision, intentional decision by the NCAA, leaderships of college athletics. You could argue it should have been, right? You could argue we should have got ahead of this, many years ago, but it all came from losing lawsuits, right? So then basically the floodgates opened, and so it wasn't a real thoughtful process. So then, the idea of collectives came up, and basically how do we get money into players' hands so we can recruit them and get here and compete and win, right? So it kind of came out of necessity. But what NIL was originally intended to be in and of itself is a very good thing. For the opportunity for young people to be compensated and rewarded for their name, image, and likeness, and develop the brand management skills and all the things that go with that should be a great opportunity. So then this last summer, we have the House settlement, and then from that, now we have a structure that's in place that's supposed to now begin to regulate all those things and get NIL back to what it was originally intended to be, right? Which is a real positive thing. Now, we're still in that kind of confusing development stage of all this, right? Just started in July. There's an oversight group, and it's
Can you share that a little bit about that? When you say the House bill, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the House settlement was an antitrust class action suit. Ended up being sort of a collection of a few suits out in California, where several former student athletes who were not able to realize the benefits of NIL when they played came to the table and said, "Hey, well, what about us, right? So through that settlement, there was a big payment back to several of those former student athletes, but it also created a framework where now, for the first time, schools can actually pay student athletes directly. So we're calling it revenue share. I think of it more as like institutional NIL. It's basically money we are paying up to a cap directly to players for their name, image, and likeness rights. And then on top of that, real NIL, which is companies that are paying young people to help sponsor, endorse their business or organization in some way, shape, or form, can come along and do that. And it's really important that we develop that because that's above that cap. So it's important for us competitively, but it's also really important that we do it right. You know, that we do it in a way that companies feel good about, that they are comfortable with, and that can really make a difference for them. And, there's this, back to your original question of like, what are the misconceptions? There is a misconception that has to be, multi-million-dollar, six-figure kind of relationships, at least with student athletes. And we have that, some of that. We need more of that. There's no question. But it doesn't have to be that either. We also have, I met with a gentleman this morning who just has a passion for our golf programs, right? And has a company based here in St. Louis, and he wants to help golf. So it may be, $10,000, $20,000. It could be, larger than that, smaller than that. And for those programs, if we have organizations that want to come alongside and help support them and be part of making those programs successful, those things can be really impactful. So it can happen in all kinds of different ways. It can happen, directly as part of a company's, traditional kind of marketing and sponsorship structure. It can happen from donors who want to support a nonprofit that have a passion for a nonprofit and link that up with high profile student athletes that can help drive attention to those causes. So there's all kinds of ways for it to happen. What I ask people is just be open-minded, right? Not think of NIL as just this negative bad thing. Think of it as an opportunity and a win-win that can be established between the organization, maybe another organization, student athletes, and Mizzou. And remember that when that's going to help us win, and when we're winning, there's big impacts to that, right? Impacts that go beyond just, feeling pretty cool that we're winning ball games. It
trickles down to the businesses, local businesses.
It impacts our economy, our brand, the university in big ways, right? So if you think of, part of having a healthy state is having a healthy flagship institution. Right. And if, you look at our enrollment over the last few years and what our football program has done in particular, along with some other sports, but, that has a big impact, right? Those things all correlate. And, we have a chance, if we can continue this momentum and the trajectory we're on from a competitive standpoint, over time, if you have winning over time consistently, eventually that changes the brand of not only the program, but the university, the state. I mean, it has a big impact. I mean, you think about how people think of Alabama or Clemson or Oregon and some of those programs that had some, several decades of struggle, right? And then over, a decade or more that have success, and suddenly that changes the brand and mindset that people have about that. And there are real significant impacts of that, maybe even more so than what it ought to be. And but it's there, and it's an opportunity if we invest in it and we continue to realize the benefits of winning. It can have a ripple effect that's pretty massive.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. If we can continue to dive a little bit deeper, if you don't mind, that rev share. Because here's what I think is cool. We got the Mizzou logos on, but somebody listening to this that may be a fan of whatever school, it's the same, right? We're all playing the same rules. And so I think to get an understanding and education of all this is huge. The rev share now, if I understand it correctly, $1 million comes in, 80-20, is that right? Or what's the rev share?
So the rev share is, I think of it again as institutional NIL. So we now have, for the first time in the history of college athletics, the ability to pay student athletes directly.
So the more tickets we sell, the more hot dogs we sell.
So that money comes just from our budget, right? You think of it all going into one big pool. If we sell tickets, people donate money, we have sponsorship revenues, we have revenues coming in from the conference. There's all of these different avenues for us to pay those dollars. It's that the 20.5 million is the cap number for this year. It'll actually go up about 4% a year. It'll be reset, refigured every 3 or 4 years. So it's going to continue to elevate over the next several years.
So 20.5 million can go to the student athletes.
Right. So what we do then is each school has the opportunity to say, okay, of that, first of all, it's permissive. You don't have to do it, right? Mm-hmm. Each school can now, if you're in the SEC or Big Ten or some of these schools, you better do it. Yeah. You're not going to be competitive. And then you determine, you being an athletic department, athletic director, we determine where those dollars are allocated per sport, right? And then we work with each sport, really driven by the coaches to determine, okay, of that, how do they want to allocate their resource in terms of their roster? And there's a ton of detail that goes into that. We've done a lot of research with professional teams and how they've allocated their rosters and what makes sense to be competitive.
So if you're, sorry, keep interrupting, but if you're, I'm just going to name it, Kentucky, you may want to put more towards basketball than football. Mm-hmm. And if you're here, you may want to go football over whatever, right? And you're not saying that, I'm saying that. But that's what they can focus on, or it could be gymnastics or whatever.
Yeah, and I would say the vast majority, if not all schools, most of those dollars are going to football and men's basketball. There are some of those resources that are going to some of our other sports. And then you work with those coaches to help make that happen, right? But that's just the cap dollars, right? That sort of salary cap kind of function that we're all working within. But it's permissive, and you can allocate it best sport as you choose. There's not a requirement one way or the other. There's a lot that goes into that, right? A lot of competitive considerations, a lot of legal considerations. There's been a whole lot that's been done behind the scenes to figure that out, and it's challenging. That the analogy I've been using more and more lately is, in many ways, as we were going in through this last summer and getting to the point where we had to make those final decisions going into this year. And I felt like I was like lining up my 4 kids and saying, okay, you get $20, you get 100, you get nothing, and you get 50. Now come back next year and we'll see what's next. Yeah. So it's hard, right? It is hard, but it's part of the reality we are facing now, because college athletics it's professionalizing. That's the other thing I've told people is we got capitalism and socialism is colliding in the world of college athletics, and you got to manage or work through all that. Yeah. So there's some real challenge to it, but there's also opportunity.
So if we could take like Ahmad Hardy, for example. I think maybe I don't know if it's a rumor, if you guys re-signed. I think you re-signed him, right? So we re-signed him. And let's say he gets his portion from the university. But then there's companies that want to give him whatever, $500,000, $50,000, $10,000. How does that work?
Mm-hmm. So, great question. So I'll answer it both for, like, if I'm thinking about it in the Ahmad Hardy example, and then maybe come back to think about how does it work for companies that want to do it. So for Ahmad Hardy, for example, we may already have a handful of corporate sponsors that have already committed to third-party NIL, that have really identified that they want to be engaged directly with Ahmad Hardy. So in that instance, it makes it really easy for us to say, okay, Ahmad, we've been able to help facilitate these things. Yeah. We have staff that are thinking about it, talking about it with sponsors all the time. We work with, I'll get into how that's structured internally at some point, but we have a team of people, right, across a few different functions that help make all that happen. So we can go to Ahmad and say, hey, here's 3 deals that are already there, and maybe that's a few $100,000 or whatever it may be, and then you can combine that then with revenue share, those direct payments, and that may be several more than a few $100,000, right? That can be part of that mix that goes in to help secure and retain Ahmad Hardy or another student athlete. So it's a mixture of both now, and that is really important for our fan base, for corporate leaders, business owners, particularly in this region of the country, to know if they care about Mizzou and they care about our success. Then that's important to know, because it does add to our ability to retain and then recruit other student athletes. So if you have a student athlete that's on board that has that kind of recognition, they could maybe drive a little bit more of those third-party NIL opportunities because of who they are and their name and all that, and that just frees up more of the revenue share dollars, that cap dollars, for us to go out and maybe recruit or retain another student athlete. It's all part of that mix.
And I guess you're probably, you talked about culture earlier. You're looking for culture for those athletes that also get the big picture. Like, if I come looking for every single dollar just for me, I look at, think of Tom Brady, right? In the NFL, he always made less, but he's won more Super Bowls than anybody. So I'd assume that's part of the puzzle. Is that fair?
Yeah, it has to be. And that's one of the real challenges for coaches these days, because they're the ones on the front line with those relationships with student athletes to help them see those things, right? Yeah. But at the same time, you have a lot of people in their ears, right? In those student athletes' ears, agents and families and others that are maybe telling them other things, right? So it's a really difficult dynamic for coaches. But you're right. That's part of the key to it. And I think part of what you're going to see where coaches, the ones that are successful, the ones that can navigate and manage that, not only the business aspect of it, but the culture aspect, and still recruiting and retaining the right type of young people that have the talent, but also the character and ability to manage all that. It gets really complex and hard. But the talented coaches in this era are the ones that are going to be able to figure that out.
What are you doing to help them? Maybe, again, selfishly, I look at this like from a wealth management standpoint. These kids are coming into hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, some of them, right? Like, so we work with a handful of NIL student athletes, and it's amazing to see how this can change their life. Like, it's amazing to me. I think it's awesome. So what are you guys doing as a university to help them understand, hey, ex-athlete, don't go out and buy that thing? Or what's the financial literacy like for you guys?
Yeah. We are doing a lot in the background to help with that. Now, it continues to be a challenge, right? Because you are dealing with young people, right, and young people many times that maybe haven't had money before, and they've got a lot of pressures and other people in their ears, right? So let's kind of start with that, right?
100% accurate.
But even before, I would say, before I got here, a couple of years ago, we had several things that are in place and partnerships with, the law school or journalism school, or, we have different financial literacy opportunities where we have speakers come in that have helped, educate our young people. And then this last summer, we put together a leadership class for all the incoming student athletes that can help develop them and gives us a platform to have some of those conversations. And now, actually, just recently, we announced a partnership with Edward Jones. I don't know if that's a competitor.
Right.
So sorry, but where they are helping us put together a curriculum and platform specifically tailored to student athletes to coach them in these opportunities. It literally has like an app where they can go through different opportunities. So we're doing a lot behind the scenes to really encourage them to embrace the opportunity, because it can be life changing. I mean, you can imagine. You know better than I do. Like, if you have that kind of money at that age and you do the right things with it, it can literally set them up for life if they think about it the right way and they approach it. So we're making sure that they at least are equipped with the opportunity to learn and the opportunity to make the right decisions, and then ultimately it's going to be up to them to do it.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm just saying, Edward Jones, I am going to be with one of their executives at dinner tonight, and that person will be wearing orange and blue. I'm going to have on Mizzou colors. I mean, I'm just saying. No, I'm just kidding. They're a great company. Awesome people. Where do you see NIL next 18 to 36 months?
Oh, boy. I would say it depends. So there's a lot of unpredictability in our world right now. So if I would say if the this house settlement and this structure that's put together, if that is able to be enforced and managed the way it's supposed to be, then I do think we are going to start to trend back to a more kind of stable environment as far as that is concerned. So away from this idea of you just dump a bunch of money into a collective and they pay players, to what NIL is supposed to be on the front end, right? Now, the if part of that has a lot to do with what happens in the legal and political environments that we are so subject to these days. So, one of the biggest challenges we have, back to the original point of how NIL came on the scene to begin with, is the NCAA, the conferences, we just continue to lose lawsuits, right? Because it's been deemed that the traditional structure of college athletics isn't defendable, right? So we have to professionalize. We had to let these things happen. Well, we keep losing lawsuits in various ways, and if we aren't able to get some type of federal protection, if Congress doesn't act, hopefully our listeners have heard about the SCORE Act, and all that was really put in place to try to sort of codify this settlement and get some protection around it so we can give it a chance to work. If that doesn't happen, and if we aren't able to somehow kind of solidify our legal standing, then it could go in a number of different directions, and we very well may get to a point where we have to really start thinking about let's further embrace this kind of professional movement, professionalization movement, and get to a point where we can collectively bargain with student athletes in some way, shape, or form, right? Particularly for the high-profile, revenue-generating sports like football and men's basketball. So I could see the model continuing to really evolve and change. I am hopeful that this current environment that we have with the settlement and the structure that's in place can begin to take, at least for a period of time, so we can be even more thoughtful about the next iteration, whatever that is. But it also may have to come on much faster because we can't get Congress to act, or we can't get the legal standing that we need to govern and put in rules that can be maintained, right? So if we can't enforce the rules, we're never going to be able to, continue to have that stabilizing effect, right? It's going to just continue to deteriorate, and we're going to get to a point where we got to do something completely different. So it's really hard to predict, but that's the world we're in right now.
That's why they have people like you and your team to figure it out, right? What one of the biggest things I think that concerns me is and you talked about this earlier, is accountability. And you talked about your coach when you were playing Kansas State, right? You show up to practice and you may not like everything that's going to happen, right? And so my fear is now you didn't have the chance to say, that guy made me mad, I'm just going to take my ball and go home and go over here and get a little bit more money, and maybe he won't yell at me so much, right? So that's my biggest concern. What do you see in there? How do you guys overcoming that?
That is a very accurate concern. It's something that I, as somebody that had that opportunity to be taught those lessons and realize the benefits of real discipline and working through problems and challenges and struggles and overcoming those. And I believe strongly in the opportunity to build up resiliency and work through things, and that is a huge part of the lessons that are learned from sports, right? It's one of the few places I think about, like my sport, what I've told football players is that it's one of the few places left in our society where you can literally get knocked down and have to get back up again, right? And again and again and again. And that resiliency is something that serves you very well in life, right? I mean, that is because we all get knocked down and you got to find a way to get back up. And one of the things that I really struggle with is this environment we're in now. In many ways, even though student athletes can make money, it's really not better for them in a lot of respects, in terms of the lessons they can learn, the opportunity to build up resiliency and work through those things. So this idea that they should be able to transfer every year and get a new NIL deal every year, while that may be economically better in some respects, is it really better for them as young people? Is it better for them academically? Is it better for them as developing character and building relationships and having experiences that they can carry with them for a lifetime? Those things, in many ways, this new world, which is kind of a necessity because of the lawsuits, is taking away, and it's really sad, and it is really difficult for coaches to navigate. And it's another reason where it is really difficult to have that job as a coach, and it's really impressive, kind of remarkable when coaches can still figure that out and navigate it, when they can still create the kind of culture and accountability among the group where they can push them and still, help them improve and grow and build up that resiliency in the face of all of it. So it is a real challenge, and it's another example of why we got to get this thing fixed, right? We got to find a way to get it to a better place, so that you can still have the balance of both, where they can have opportunities and they can realize the benefits of their name, image, and likeness, but also realize the benefits of working through challenges and not just have to pick up their ball and go to the next place every time.
It's awesome. Brag about University of Missouri right now. Talk about the end zone project you got going. I mean, you've got a lot of good stuff going on at the campus right now. Talk to our listeners, maybe those business owners, those leaders, and say, you know what, man, hearing all this, I want to get involved. I want to help out. Whether that's, again, $5,000, $10,000, $500,000, whatever the number is. Brag about the university and how they can get involved.
Yeah, so despite all the craziness that we just talked about, right? How wild college athletics is. What I tell people and what I genuinely believe is if we're going to be going through something like this and managing this, doing it at a place like Missouri, not only because we happen to be winning some ball games recently, but because we are literally the flagship school in the middle of a big state with, a lot of, corporate resources on either side. We're in the SEC. We have alignment of leadership. We have a very unique position right now where we have a board of curators and a president and really other leaders across campus that truly see the benefits of winning in athletics, and that they see it, they understand it, they recognize that we are the brand engine of the university, right? And what people think and how they perceive Missouri, the university, and in many ways the state, right? Yeah. Because the name correlation is driven by how our sports programs do. So recognizing that, being willing to invest in it is hugely important, and that's what's leading to things like retaining good coaches and investing $250 million in our football stadium and really expanding the resources that can be generated by that facility and the experience that our people have when they come there, and the experience that young people, students have when they come, and the impact that has on enrollment, and all those things are sort of rolling together. So we are in a unique position at Mizzou to take advantage of all this, right? So you have this kind of wild landscape, changing industry, and we're positioned where it's much more of an opportunity than a threat to us, because we can elevate and do things and compete in maybe ways we would have been really difficult to before. And the landscape is changing even more so in the years ahead. So it's going to be really critically important that we are competing at and at a place where we are viewed as one of those top programs, because it's going to continue to change. So, people can get involved and help in that in various ways. What I tell people is the first way is always to come out, be there, be a part of it, get a couple tickets, come to a game or two, get season tickets, invest in even better season tickets. And then, we ask a lot of our people who really care, who want to be a part of it, to want to be true stakeholders in what we're doing, to get involved in the Mizzou Leadership Circle. So we have this organization where folks can give above and beyond their seat sort of minimums and what they need to do for that game day experience, and really invest in our programs. And they may have a passion about a certain program that we have, and they want to help make a difference there, or they just want to help invest overall and help us, do the things that it's necessary to compete. And then the other avenue is more and more is this NIL piece, and having companies, businesses just be open-minded to the concept and not think of it as necessarily a negative or as something that maybe they can't accomplish because maybe they don't think they're big enough, or that it doesn't fit with what they do, because there's all kinds of ways that those relationships can be established, and it's really important for us to do it the right way, right? We need to get down here to St. Louis and spend time with you all, right? And to think about, what your business or organization needs, what you want to accomplish, how can we establish a relationship that's meaningful to you, and that, hey, you recognize you're investing back in our state and in an organization with our university that impacts that state in massive ways. So it has to come out from both directions. What fits for you, but also being a part of something that's going to elevate, the university, the state, our economy, and our brand overall.
Yeah. Well, my last question is, and it kind of ties right into this sticker. You got one on there too, and it's it's helping you achieve a future greater than your past. And it doesn't mean the past is bad by any stretch of imagination, but when you hear that, personally, professionally, what does it mean to you when you hear achieving a future greater than your past?
Wow. My mind immediately goes to, both kind of try to navigating all this for Mizzou athletics, but then also just as a husband and a father, and making sure that I don't lose sight of the things that really matter, right? My faith, being a Christian man and living by that. I think the challenge I have, which so many people do these days, is we all get so busy, and you have these demanding roles, and staying grounded in the relationships that are closest to you, and giving yourself the space to stay true to those, to stay present, and I think that's in the future that's greater than my past. I would like to do that better than maybe what I always have. Right? I'd like to think of myself as a family man, a Christian man, and living by those values. But I also, just like so many, I get consumed by what's in front of me and the demands of the world that we live in. So that's the first thing that comes to mind, really, that I want to continue to lean into.
Awesome.
So,
Laird, thanks so much for being on the Circuit of Success, man. You've got a very demanding day. For you to come over here and have the time to do this has been awesome. Your leadership and your energy is amazing. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been fun.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.